The moving shadows. In a quaint, fog-laden town in the heart of New England, there stood an old Victorian house, long forgotten and shrouded in mystery. Its once vibrant colors were now faded, and the paint peeled like old skin, revealing the aged wood underneath. The Anderson family, a couple in their 30s with 2 children, Jake and Emily, decided to purchase the house, charmed by its unique architecture and the promise of a fresh start. However, the townsfolk were cautious, exchanging hushed whispers in the local diner about the eerie happenings that had plagued the house for decades. Stories of shadows moving on their own, unexplained noises in the night, and an overwhelming sense of being watched filled the air. Some claimed the house was cursed, while others believed it was haunted by the spirit of its last owner, a reclusive artist who had vanished without a trace. Still, the Andersons dismissed these tales, excited to breathe new life into their dream home. From the moment they moved in, an unsettling atmosphere enveloped them. It was subtle at first. The air felt unnaturally cool, and the corners of the rooms always seemed to flicker with movement, like something lurking just out of sight. Jake and Emily reveled in exploring their new home, climbing the creaking stairs and discovering hidden nooks. But within a few weeks, they began to notice odd occurrences. It started small, a flicker of movement that caught their eye as they played, shadows that seemed to dance along the walls when no one was looking. One evening, as they gathered in the living room for a family movie night, Jake noticed something dark skimming across the wall, its form twisting and writhing in the flickering light of the television. "Mom, did you see that?" he exclaimed, pointing at the shadow. "What are you talking about, sweetie?" Their mother, Sarah, asked, glancing up from her phone. But by the time she turned her gaze to the wall, the shadow had vanished, leaving only the light flickering behind the screen. "It was right there," Jake insisted, feeling a rush of both excitement and dread. Emily shrugged it off, attempting to downplay her brother's fear. "You're imagining things, Jake. This house is just old and creaky." Yet as the days turned into weeks, the oddities continued. The shadows became bolder, creeping along the walls and forming shapes that made the children uneasy. One particularly stormy night, while thunder crashed overhead and rain lashed against the windows, the power flickered and then went out, plunging the house into darkness. "Jake, grab the flashlight," Emily squeaked, her voice quivering with fear. Jake fumbled for the flashlight, and when he finally managed to turn it on, the beam cut through the darkness. The shadows on the walls seemed to writhe in response, twisting into elongated shapes that resembled figures with hauntingly familiar features. "Are you seeing this?" Jake gasped, his heart racing. "Let's get out of here," Emily urged, backing away toward the staircase. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from upstairs, making them freeze in terror. The siblings exchanged terrified glances before deciding to investigate. As they climbed the stairs, the shadows danced around them, flickering with every creak of the old wood. Upon reaching the second floor, they found the door to their parents' bedroom slightly ajar. Jake pushed it open, revealing an empty room. But the shadows were swirling like a storm, as if they were alive. An icy draft swept through the room, sending chills down their spines. "Where's Mom and Dad?" Emily whispered, anxiety creeping into her voice. Before they could answer, a figure formed in the shadows, a tall silhouette that loomed in the corner. The air thickened, and a chilling presence filled the room. "Who are you?" Jake called out, his voice shaking. The figure didn't respond with words. Instead, it emitted a low, sorrowful hum that resonated in the silence. The shadows around it flickered and danced, forming a picture of a man with paint-splattered clothes and a haunted expression. "Jake, I think it's him, the artist who used to live here," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I think you're right," Jake replied, realizing that this shadow was tied to the stories they had heard in town. Determined to understand what was happening, they rushed back downstairs to find their parents. Sarah and Mark were in the living room, candles illuminating their worried faces. "What happened?" "We heard a noise," Mark said, his brow furrowed. "Mom, Dad, there's something in the house. We saw shadows, and there was a figure in your room," Jake exclaimed. Mark exchanged a skeptical look with Sarah, but couldn't ignore the unease radiating from his children. "Show us," he said, taking Jake and Emily's hands. They led their parents back upstairs, but as they reached the room, the shadows had vanished, leaving only the faint glow of the candlelight. "I don't see anything," Mark said, though he could feel the lingering chill in the air. "But it was right there," Emily insisted, pointing toward the corner. Realizing that they had to confront this strange presence together, the family decided to research the history of the house. They spent hours in the local library, digging through old newspapers and records. They discovered that the house had belonged to a painter named William Hargrove, known for his emotionally charged artwork. After a tragic fire that claimed his wife, he had disappeared, leaving behind only whispers of his madness. Armed with this knowledge, the Andersons resolved to reach out to the artist's spirit, believing he was still trapped within the shadows. One night, they gathered in the living room, setting up a makeshift shrine with candles, flowers, and images of his paintings. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as they lit the candles and held hands. "William Hargrove," Mark called out, his voice steady but filled with compassion. "We know you're here. We see your pain and want to help you find peace." As they spoke, the shadows began to swirl again, forming the outline of a man, his features emerging from the darkness. The air was heavy with emotion, and the family could feel the sorrow radiating from the figure. "Let go of your sorrow," Sarah pleaded. "You don't have to be alone anymore." The shadows writhed, and for a moment, the room filled with warmth. Images flashed before them, memories of love, laughter, and the beauty of life before the tragedy that had consumed William. The soft sound of a melody filled the air, echoing the joy of memories long buried. With each word, the figure began to dissipate, and the shadows transformed into a cascade of light, illuminating the room with a warm glow. The family watched in awe as the spirit of William Hargrove gradually lifted into the air, his sorrow replaced with a sense of peace. As the last remnants of the shadows faded, the atmosphere shifted. The cold air lifted, replaced by a comforting warmth. Jake and Emily shared a knowing glance, feeling an immense sense of relief wash over them. They had reached out to a lost soul and offered him solace. From that night onward, the house transformed. The shadows no longer moved on their own, but settled peacefully along the walls, lingering like gentle reminders of the artist's legacy. The air felt lighter and the atmosphere shifted from one of unease to one of warmth and tranquility. The Anderson family continued their life in the Victorian house, often reminiscing about their extraordinary encounter. Jake and Emily had learned that while shadows could represent fear and uncertainty, they also held stories and memories waiting to be understood. They knew they had given the artist the gift of release, allowing him to find peace at last. As the years passed, they transformed the house into a vibrant home filled with laughter, creativity, and love. They would often find themselves gazing at the walls, grateful for the journey that had led them to appreciate the beauty in both light and shadow. The moving shadows had become a part of their story, a reminder that even in the darkest corners, there is always hope and the possibility of healing.